Preseason is done, and the Ravens released their 53-man roster. Here to recap all of that is Coach from All 22 Films. Let's bring him in. Hello, Coach. How are you? Thank you so much for joining the channel.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me and being so accommodating and flexible with my schedule trying to get here. So I'm excited.
Oh gosh, no, it's my pleasure to have you here. I'm so grateful for for coming on the channel and just sharing your wealth of knowledge and your wisdom and your expertise in football, especially our Baltimore Ravens. So, would you tell everyone, just give a quick introduction of, who you are and what kind of content you create here on YouTube?
Coach DC generally is what people refer to me as at All 22 Films, and I have a YouTube channel and a Twitter, or X as you call it. Occasionally, I'll dabble in TikTok if I have time, but these days I don't. I don't really have time to get that far in content creation to get to a third platform because we recently welcomed our third child into the house, so there's a lot of late nights and early mornings trying to get content done. And I knew it was coming. Obviously, I had 9 months prep time, and we're excited to get the season started. But trying to get things done now is a different level of there's a different work flow, different work level, I guess is what I'll say. A lot of times getting up in the morning um, earlier than I ever would have before. Times where I would have gone to bed when I was a single man.
Oh yes. Well, congratulations on welcoming your new baby. And
Thank you.
I hope you start to be able to get some sleep at night. But I know the beginning, it's just, it's a part of it. But congratulations to you and your wife and your family on the new addition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. He's getting better, so we're ready for the season, and we're ready.
Okay.
We're ready to see how it all shakes down, particularly starting next week.
Ooh, we're gonna get into it, Coach. We are gonna talk about it. But before we do, can you share a little bit of your background and how you got into football coaching and how it all started for you?
There's a little bit sideways, like I kind of referred to you before. I feel like I've been very blessed to have other people bestow or pass on knowledge to me, and then at times I've been able to take that knowledge and move sideways or in another direction. I was a high school coach for I guess 11 years, 12 years, something like that. At the same time, I was coaching a little bit of youth football. Prior to that, I had been a sports writer for a small newspaper, and during that time, I'm glad that the progression was the way that it occurred. Meaning, I'm glad that I got the chance to work as a sports writer and then go into coaching, which I always wanted to do. My grandfather was a well-known coach. Let's put it that way. My father was a well-known coach and athlete, and trying to live up to those responsibilities was difficult until I became ready, I think, to coach, maybe late 20s, early 30s. So I'm glad for the progression that it occurred that way and not the reverse. I'm glad that I was able to observe the game from an impartial perspective as a reporter and then go into coaching because it helped me, I think, to retain a high level of respect for the other teams and coaches and try to pass that on to my kids that I was coaching. Eventually, trying to get into content creation was basically around the pandemic time, a little bit before. I was watching Coach Evans at Suitability for the better part of a season or two. And through just watching him and listening to his videos and interacting a little bit in the comment section, I finally, decided to try it myself.
Wow. You never know. That's so empowering. It's so powerful what you just said. A couple of things, and then I'm certainly going to move on. But two things: you never know whose life you touch. You never know whose life you impact. Who would have thought that you watching and interacting with Coach Evans from Sip to Tally Films? Let me take 2.5 real quick. If you are not subscribed to Sip to Tally Films, please make sure you go over and subscribe to Sip to Tally. And we'll also make sure to leave the links to All 22 Films in this description box so that you can head over to All 22 Films and subscribe to him as well. But you never know who you impact and who's watching your content. And even if it's not content creation per se, when you live your life and you go out and you interact with people just daily, you never know how impactful that can be. Your interaction with them can be. So that was a
100%.
really good takeaway. Yeah, very good.
100%. And that was the thing that I think always for me was there to trying to be a coach because I was teaching at the same time. I think I relayed to you that I was an educator for like 20 years. So you were coaching the same students or people that you worked with in the building for educational purposes. So that was important to me, and so I have probably maybe gone a little bit overboard sometimes in my content,
Mhm.
trying to instruct what I think I know. At the same time, I always am trying to learn more myself. I'm a big believer and advocate in a particular website called coachhuey.com. Now, I don't know that that one would necessarily appeal to younger people in the audience, but it's a text-based forum where you can interact with coaches and learn from them, and it's very organized. And I think they have 30,000 members. That particularly like right now, as football season begins, there will be constant threads and discussion about schemes, concepts, and players to learn from. And so I try to learn from other people, even though I don't know who those people are. I just know a username.
Yeah, sure. And I think the merging of you being a sports analyst and you being a coach, those two came together in a very creative way, and it shows in the content that you produce. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks. I don't think I've really ever interacted or excuse me discussed that with people. I think things happen on a timeline, and I think it's the right timeline. And for me, in this regard, as far as my content creation, it's number three. Number one was being an impartial sports writer who was responsible for trying to relay stories to people the next day in the newspaper. I know newspapers are going out of business. And then number two was the coach slash educator. And eventually it moved into here. So I feel like I've been uniquely blessed to do this through, in some cases, no real choice of my own.
Sometimes it works out that way. It's we have our own plan, our own path, but God has a different journey for us, and the journey for us that He has is always so much better and so much greater than what we could ever hope for. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
did you coach in football? Any
D-
particular
uh,
position?
Primarily defense and linebacker, and that was my favorite position to coach for a lot of reasons. Number one, I found it to be very challenging for the young men that I coached. Number two, I was exposed to two people who were coaches and at that position, and they were able to help me simplify it and make things more understandable for the kids. And then also number three, through getting to know the higher levels of football, I found out that it was even more challenging than I understood. That for me is the position that I identify with the game, is the inside linebacker position and outside linebacker, but both of those. And I understand that there's a lot of discussion and people who don't focus on those positions, and they focus on other positions, wide receiver, quarterback, and corner, to the exclusion of others on the field. I try to, as much as I can, I try to cover a wide array of offensive and defensive concepts, to the best of my ability. So that's the one that I gravitate towards, and it's the one that unfortunately I think has the smallest audience for content creation.
Uh, I shared with you earlier that my husband is a former linebacker. He played, in high school, he played in college. Nicest guy you'll ever meet, one of the kindest souls. But on the field, he's coming for you, coming with a vengeance for you. So, yeah, I really enjoy the linebacker position. And thank goodness we have Roquan Smith on our team. And we'll get into that in just a bit. But in terms of your coaching philosophy, what core values or principles did you carry when you were coaching the linebackers?
That's an awesome question, first of all, because I think there has to be one. If you don't have one and you're doing something where there is immediate feedback loop, and what I mean is there's a play, we line up, there's a play, there's some kind of result to the play, and then we have to do the same thing 30 seconds later. The feedback loop is instantaneous, and if you haven't taught particular concepts or particular reactions to the players, their feedback loop in their mind is going to be destroyed as far as whether they trust you or not. So the responsibility, I felt an immense responsibility for their personal success. And
Hmm.
and so what I guess the way that I'll explain that is I am very competitive, and I learned through time that when you find the convergence of your own selfishness, your own competitiveness, and other people's interests, whatever their interests are, whether it's music, sports, if those things converge at the same time, first of all, it's a lot of fun. But second of all, that I think bestows a lot of responsibility on you, because now it's a good thing though. Imagine you had one of them, their interest level, their motivation, but for whatever reason you were not competitive, you're going to have a failed situation. I feel like you have to have this convergence of someone's selfishness slash competitiveness with the interest level and motivation and energy that young people have. And so for us, I guess if you were to ask what my core philosophy would be, is we have to show up every day and do it the same way we do on game day. And I
Mm.
understand that that statement is not going to be supported by a lot of people nowadays. And here's why I will say that. I cannot expect you to show up on Friday. That's when we played our games, Fridays in high school. It took on Friday and execute with 95% efficiency if I didn't have the same expectation with you for you on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. Thursday's a little different, day before the game. You obviously are going to not be wearing pads. And so for me, it was, as a person, adult, um, showing up every day with the highest level of preparedness and the highest level of expectation. And there is certainly, in my experience, a period of time at which you're adjusting to your players and your players are adjusting to you. And I do believe that you have to adjust somewhat. If you think of, I don't want to use numbers to do this. I don't want to say that the coach is at 100 and the players are at 0, because that's not fair. We associate 100 with positivity and 0 with negativity. So I don't know exactly how to utilize this, but there has to be some meeting, some movement towards each other. Unfortunately, I think that oftentimes nowadays the athletes, the younger people, have to move further towards you than you do to them overall. But initially, on the first day, the second day, sometimes you have to be the one that moves a little bit closer to them to draw them to you. And so for me, it was, I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to be overly prepared and show you as the young person, or maybe even young coaches, that every day I show up, every day that we all show up, excuse me, I'm going to be ready for every possible situation here. And I expect you to as well. Um, in my experience, I've been blessed enough to have other people around me who helped in that regard and really, in some cases, propelled me forward. So it wasn't all me, Yolanda, at all. So I guess that would be it. No one's ever really asked me that question. It would be, I'm going to show up every day with having done an overwhelming amount of preparation for you as the player, such that you really don't have a choice but to raise your level of commitment as well.
I love that. I love that because that's contagious. It's infectious. And when you, as the leader, demonstrate that, show that in everything that you do, the players also are going to want to be able to respond in kind. So that's really good. How do you think your coaching philosophy aligns with what you've seen from the Baltimore Ravens coaching staff?
Ooh, that's a little bit tougher question. I think it definitely aligns with the way that I try to create content, which is not exactly what you asked, obviously,
Sure.
because sometimes I just flood the market. Sometimes I don't know what it is. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, let's make another video. Oh, let's make another video, because there's so many interesting things that I see, and I think I understand to a certain degree that I want to try to present to people. But in terms of as it relates to the Ravens, I do think they generally show up. I get the impression that they show up every day, absolutely committed to their work. And I don't know that as far as practice situations or meeting rooms. We see, was it Ravens Wired, and we see the meeting rooms, and we certainly see some clips of them out on the practice field. But on game day, they show up, and we have. I mean, I've had two instances where I feel like we have not shown up, and I've said it in my when we went to Arizona last year. I think after beating the Lions, and then I think week 8, if I could be wrong, I didn't think that we had the same level of I'm showing up with complete commitment to everything that time and one other, to my knowledge. And so for me, I guess how those things align would be I identify with what I think I see, the way the Ravens operate. But hey, that could be my own projection. Hey, this is my mentality, and I think I see that in my favorite team. But certainly, there's millions of people in the world who think the same thing about the Ravens as well, even before Hallbar, obviously.
Yeah. As you review our defensive formations that the Ravens primarily use, do you think that there's a different or another formation that might be better suited for the talent that we have?
That's a good question. I think everything is so dynamic now that I think the answer to your question could be yes and no at the same time, depending on the situation, depending on the moment. Um, I do feel like we have been very good at adjusting throughout the game at times in the last 2 years. Now, we all do, myself included, we remember 2021 with Coach Wink Martindale, and we compare that to the next season with Mike Macdonald. And I think sometimes that can be a little unfair because we certainly had some really good seasons with Coach Wink Martindale on defense as well. So when I try to remember or compare things, I try to remember one style or scheme at its height and compare it to another style at its height as well. I think that's more fair. Um, and so I think maybe we were a little more simplistic 2019, 2020, a little more direct. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to show you what we're going to do. Are you good enough to execute against that? Versus Mike Macdonald, I feel like was a little bit more like a house of mirrors. I'm going to show you something, and from this one thing, we could do three different things, and now you have to react to it as an offense. I don't know if I've ever really explained it well, the thoughts that I have in my mind, but I feel like we, in the last 2 years under Mike Macdonald, we were running plays on defense. And I know that, of course we were, coach. Everybody runs different coverages. Yes, but what I'm saying is the mentality was we're going to run this play, and it's your job as an offense to figure out what it is and find the weakness of it on each particular play. So I guess the answer to your question would be yes and no at the same time. That yes, there are times where I think a different look could succeed, but I think it depends on the situation. I will say this, Yolanda, I didn't feel like in the preseason this year, I didn't feel like we were doing that as much. I felt like we were very vanilla and we were very basic, and almost like we were trying to find out if the players on our defense could do these core two or three things as opposed to a wider umbrella or a wider net of, hey, you may have to execute 12 different things in the span of one half of football. I don't know if I've gotten to closer to the answer to your question or not.
No, you did. You answered it thoroughly. Thank you. And there's so much to unpack there with your response because that leads more questions in my brain. Do you think that it's because we have a new defensive coordinator and he's trying to find his footing? Do you think it's because we have we have new personnel on the field? Do you think it was because we were primarily playing our backups on defense? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, great questions, all of them. I do have this to say is that when Mike came here in 2022, the system was drastically changed. There was a drastic change in system. There was a drastic change from, Wink to his system. I believe that Coach Orr is going to integrate a lot of Mike Macdonald's system this year already. How much? 60%, 70%. I think that could change by week. So, like me personally, I don't really even get into the when a coach, in this case Zach Orr, was with Mike Macdonald the last 2 years. I think he's going to retain as much of that system as he can, and then put his new wrinkles on it. I don't think he showed any of those wrinkles in the preseason, and I think that was intentional on his part. I get the sense that Zach Orr wasn't trying to show too much, maybe to the Chiefs. Um, Conversely, maybe he was trying to show things at times and make the Chiefs think those things would be there, and then they will not. I don't know. We'll find the answers to that. That game's going to happen so fast. It's going to be such a fast moving game with so many parts. People have asked me, like, do you think Zach Orr's ready? Yes. Like, I feel like the dude's been ready for everything that he's ever confronted, including his career-ending injury. Like, everything I've ever seen from that guy's been class and a professional approach. I'm excited to have him. We knew that Mike Macdonald wasn't coming back, right? So
Yeah.
I was glad that we retained him as a long-term piece. I think his age and his connection to the Ravens organization were clear strengths in terms of the choice. Who would we keep?
Yeah. Speaking of preseason, I'd like to just chat a little bit about each one of the games from a defensive perspective because you are Uh, I'm going to call you, whether you agree with me or want to co-sign. You are a defensive mastermind, a defensive guru in your own right. So I just want to get some of your takeaways from, let's start with game one against the Philadelphia Eagles. Tough loss, but what were some of the negatives that stood out to you on defense against the Eagles?
I think we were testing our system. And what I mean by that is, and this is not systemic to just the Ravens defense, this is all defenses at the professional level. You're going to have difficulty against 11 personnel formations, defending the run game to the boundary, and retaining the ability to disguise your coverages. It all comes down, in my mind, and this might be a simplistic understanding. Listeners, to your show or my, content are certainly able to provide their own explanation. The boundary side safety, are you dropping the boundary side safety down to deal with the run game to that side, which can reveal to the offense certain coverages you're not going to use. It tightens the umbrella of possible coverages you can use post snap. Am I saying this in a way that makes sense first?
Yes, you are. It makes
And
sense.
so I think we were intentionally not doing so to test or gauge some of our players' ability to handle some of that stress. Now, it's not just Trenton Simpson, but Trenton Simpson, when he's on the field with Roquan Smith, he's going to be lined up to the boundary. So if the ball is on the left hash or the right hash, he's going to be on the shorter side of the field. Roquan is going to be to the wide side. In my opinion, we were stressing not just Trenton Simpson, but some of our other guys intentionally to see how much of that level of responsibility they could handle
Hmm.
in that simulated environment. The Philadelphia Eagles did the same. They did the same thing to us last year. Run the ball to the boundary out of 11 personnel, oftentimes the running back and tight end to that side. I know that the way that I talk about the game is probably different from a lot of other people because they're talking about certain players, the names, and I'm talking about positional designations. So I probably need to evolve in that way and talk about more player centric stuff. But systemically, the things we had trouble with against the Eagles, in my opinion, were things that modern NFL defenses are having trouble with by and large anyway. So while it did frustrate me, hey, why don't we walk the boundary side safety down and just go ahead and say you're not going to run the ball here? And on a lot of their RPO stuff, we would be giving Trenton Simpson a little bit more support there, in my opinion, because now he could just go with the running back. He doesn't have to slow play it. If your husband was listening, he would know what I'm talking about between slow playing and just go. Um, and I think that there was times where we intentionally stayed in a certain look to stress our guys a little bit more and see how they reacted. I think there's probably a little bit more specific things to say, but that will be my general observation.
Okay. On the opposite side, what stood out to you positively that we did on defense against the Eagles?
Well, Ojabo didn't play in that game,
Right.
if I recall correctly, right?
That's
This,
correct.
those, yeah. So we didn't get to see him, and that was frustrating. I have been really pleased to see Tavius Robinson play so many snaps. A young player who played in the SEC, who's from Canada, in fact. To see him getting that experience, of course, he was not a first round pick, so we're trying to accelerate a lot of those guys' development so that we can get more out of them in their third and fourth year. Guys that are on that developmental track of the first year they're with us, maybe they're not going to contribute a lot. I guess Trenton Simpson, on the same developmental track, right? Except his is sped up because he's going to play a lot this year.
Yeah.
Um, to see how athletic and smart and confident Nate Wiggins was, I think it was the first possession, maybe the second, where they targeted him so much and he was up to the task. I think that was encouraging for all of us Ravens fans, regardless of whether we wanted to draft corner or offensive line or receiver in the first round. To see him play and go, wow, there's a lot of talent there. I think that was probably the most encouraging thing. I think who's the other safety that we kept? Sanusi King.
Sanusi.
I think
Yeah.
yeah, I think he got penalized for one of his hits, but he was also involved in a tackle. He looked very impressive. I don't think he was as impressive the last two games as Bo Braid was, but Kane was was certainly someone that stood out in a limited amount of reps that game as well.
Yeah, definitely. My takeaway would certainly be Nate Wiggins, game one. He came out and just demonstrated, this is why you drafted me in the first round.
Yeah.
This is why. And let me show you. If you had any question about it, if you had any reservation, let me silence the critics and let me demonstrate and let my play show. I, for one, was one who wanted an offensive lineman in the first round. I did.
Yeah.
I, I I'm not going to change that.
Same
But
here.
it didn't go. It didn't happen that way. And I said, okay, well, this is who we took in the first round, Nate Wiggins. We'll see what he can do. And game one against the Eagles, my mouth was shut because I said, Ravens knew something that I didn't. Ravens saw something that perhaps I didn't. And I was pleasantly surprised with Nate,
Yeah.
game one.
Yeah. It was, yeah, me too. And I knew the talent level. And correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe you don't have this information, but I think he's 20 years old. So being
Ooh,
able to take him,
wow.
yeah, I believe I could be wrong. Maybe he's 21, but I think he's still 20 years old. But to be able to take him in the first round and have that 5th year option for someone who is that young,
Yes.
he almost reminds me, I do not think that he'll play to this level his first year versus this player's rookie year that I'm going to mention in a moment. He reminds me a little bit of Derek Stingley with the Texans, who played extremely well last year, who's a little bigger and a little bulkier maybe. And what I'm referring to is Derek Stingley as a freshman at LSU, I think it was a freshman, was probably the best outside corner in the country in college. And
Yes.
the way Nate Wiggins played in that first game kind of reminded me that super athlete who, even against other great athletes, has the confidence to be like, all right, you're not going to beat me deep. So I know I can deal with all this underneath or shorter concepts. I can handle all this, and I can take that away from you too because I'm fast enough to deal with it.
Yeah.
He's a unique talent, and we have hopefully we're blessed with a healthy Marlon Humphrey,
Yeah.
Brandon Stevens, who's a rock. You know, he played every snap last year, and Nate Wiggins all year. That is a blessing to have those 3 guys at outside corner.
Certainly. Certainly. My concern about Nate was his size. I just thought, oh, he looks or appears to be smaller, on the smaller side. But one thing I can say
Absolutely.
about him, despite his size, whether he small, medium, large, it doesn't matter how you classify him. Despite his size, he's not afraid of contact. He doesn't shy away from it. And as you said, he plays with that boldness, that
Mm-hmm.
confidence, that aggression. And of course, he's got that speed to say, you're not going to beat me. So that's
Yep.
not going to happen. Extremely sticky in coverage, just a very good, solid player. So that was so I totally agree with you on that one from game one in against the Eagles. Game two, game two, we rebounded, we bounced back against the Falcons. From a defensive perspective, what was there anything negative that you took away from that game?
Well, we still have trouble. When I say trouble, again, I am going off of the preposition, if you accept it, that we are intentionally staying in as many too high safety looks as possible on as many snaps as possible to
Yeah.
retain the ability to change coverage post snap. And I don't like to say confuse quarterbacks. I will answer your question. Sorry, I'm going in a roundabout way.
It's okay.
Um, I've always related this to Joe Burrow in that we, under Mike, we retained that too high safety look as long as possible pre snap, such that Joe Burrow's processing of the coverage post snap was altered in that zero point 0.6 seconds or zero point 0.8 seconds directly after the snap. He's used to a particular, any quarterback is used to a particular thing. Okay, we're running this concept against cover 3. There's my read, bang. We, I think it's a smart investment. I do. I am a 8-man front guy when I can be, meaning a one high safety alignment. But I absolutely wish that I could go out there as a coach on defense and I could accomplish what I want to accomplish from a too high safety look. And I think the Ravens are trying to do that still under Zach Orr.
Yes.
And I credit the way that we did it under Mike Macdonald. That's when I explain it that way, that's the pre-snap alignment. Post-snap, we're often moving some of those guys around. The parts are moving, uh, elongating the quarterback's ability to read, lengthening, excuse me, his ability to read the coverage and get the ball out. And I think that's why you saw an uptick in sacks for us in 2023. We correct me if I'm wrong. I think we went from 42 sacks in 2022 to 60 sacks last year, and I think it's because we got better at obfuscating the coverage post snap and giving the pass rush that extra zero point 0.3 or zero point 0.4 seconds to get to the quarterback because the quarterback still has the ball in his hand. So as it relates to week 2, sorry, I think seeing David Ojabo come out there and be able to move the way that he did kind of excited me because it was like, okay, he can be a part of what I was just describing, that four-man rush. Not just we're going to line up these four guys and they're rushing, still retaining some versatility. But Ojabo looks to me like a guy who is going to be able to win some battles against starting offensive tackles. And I thought we started to see that in the Falcons game. And I think we even saw it last week against the Packers. I think he looks supremely athletic. And for him to be I don't know, is he our third best outside linebacker or our fourth best? For him to
Third.
not
Yeah.
be, yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. I think we're in a good place there. Obviously, as long as Van Noy, Owe, and Ojabo are healthy, I think we're in a great place with those three guys. I really do. And I understand people would like to have someone who's already got a 14, 15 sack season under their belt. I think we've got a lot of potential there, and Ojabo started to show it against the Falcons. That was encouraging for me. Also, I just got done doing a video on JAD, and to see him moving and playing well, even in off coverage generally, and reacting quickly was important for him to be. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, he's in his third year.
He is. Yes. Third year.
Yes. So I thought he played well that game against the Falcons, and maybe I'm omitting or not remembering certain plays that were negative, but I thought he played well. So there were guys there that I thought were impressive, and then I thought Bo Braid started to show that he was active in that game as well. I thought he was beat in coverage. One time we were bringing heavy pressure, and I thought he was beat on like a corner route or something. It would end up being incomplete. But other than that, I felt like Bo Braid was a guy that was showing up at the play, and I don't even know how many tackles he had that game, if any at all.
Yeah. I will agree with seeing a healthy David Ojabo on the field was a highlight for me because losing Jadeveon Clowney, who there was just a resurgence in his career when he came to the Ravens. People said, I heard, oh, he's washed. He's old. He doesn't have anything left. We're bringing this, and the same thing about Kyle Van Noy. Oh, he's straight off the couch. He's not going to be able to contribute much.
Right.
They came in very late. I think we signed Van Noy after, game 2, maybe game 3. I don't remember, but it was after the season started. We
Yeah.
signed Jadeveon
Yeah.
Clowney right after training camp.
Yep.
And arguably, these two did not have time to gel, so to speak, an entire offseason with the other teammates. That didn't slow them down one bit.
Exactly.
Both of them came out of the gate on fire, just swinging. And it was great to see. Now that we lost Jadeveon Clowney to the Panthers, I had a question mark, especially because Ojabo wasn't even cleared to play until that game
Hmm.
against the Falcons. So seeing Ojabo healthy, game 2, and he looked sharp, he looked crisp, he looked fast, he looked very athletic.
Yes,
Everything
he
that we
did.
everything that we wanted from him, right, when we drafted him, that we've just not really been able to see because of health, primarily. We got a glimpse of it. And, that was good to see.
Sudden. He's very sudden, and he closes distance in a quicker fashion than other players. He almost reminds me of Clowney in some ways.
Hmm.
Um, but as an aside, like I am interested in this dynamic in Baltimore and in Seattle, wherever Mike Macdonald has shown up. And I don't like to attribute large scale changes to one person generally, because Chuck Smith and the guys, they had an unbelievable defensive staff last year.
Yeah.
Overall, that whole staff was amazing.
Yes,
And I think 2 or 3 years from now, you're going to see 3, 4, or 5 guys from that staff be defensive coordinators. You already have 3, I think.
you do. Yeah.
Um, Zach Orr, Weaver, and then the guy from Philly that went down to Tennessee, I think. Um, so there is this dynamic though that wherever Mike Macdonald has shown up, edge players have produced more.
Hmm.
I talked about it in a Jabo video I did a couple of weeks ago. You can interrupt me if you want if I'm going off on a tangent, but I am wondering: are we going to see in Baltimore a drop off in sack production by the removal of Mike Macdonald's system? I don't necessarily think that that is true or that is going to be the case. But look at Clowney's production before he got to Baltimore. All of a sudden, he shows up here, he gets 9.5 sacks. Kyle
Right.
Van Noy. Now Van Noy in the last 5 weeks of 2022 played spectacular football. Before we took him on in week 3 or week 4 of 2023. He played spectacular football for the Chargers. Someone should have signed him. My suspicion is Clowney and Van Noy didn't want to sign. That's my suspicion. you know, but
Yeah.
as it stands here where we are now, seeing Ojabo look threatening, look very sudden and athletic, like you said, in week 2 was encouraging because I don't say I'm worried that our sack production won't sustain. I am interested to see what happens in Seattle with their sack production and what happens in Baltimore with ours. Just a quick summary of that. Before he goes to Michigan in 2021, Aiden Hutchinson had 4.5 career sacks. David Ojabo had none.
Hmm.
0. When he showed up in 2021, those two combined for 25 sacks. He comes to Baltimore in 2022. Justin Houston puts together 9.5 sacks after everyone thought he was done. We produced 42 as a team. We produced 60 last year with Clowney and Van Noy having career years. To me, I'm kind of starting to see a trend in those 3 situations with 6 different players: Hutchinson, Ojabo, Justin Houston, Van Noy, and Clowney. 5 different players, excuse me. So forgive me for not being succinct about it. I'm not very good at being succinct.
That is okay. I appreciate your thorough explanation because that is something that we've talked about on this channel quite a bit. Do you think there will be a drop off in production without Mike Macdonald? And now, to your point, more specifically in terms of the players and personnel on the field, do you think there'll be a drop off in sack production without Clowney? That's a question that we've discussed here several times, and it's one that I'm watching. I'm hopeful. And at the start of the off season, I said, yeah, I think there is going to be some type of drop off because we didn't know what was going to happen with Ojabo. We weren't getting any updates. It's just, his timetable to recover, his mini camp, and then they pushed it back to training camp, and it was,
Right?
and so I said, yeah, well, I mean, we did. I don't know what we're going to do or how we're going to address the deficit. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's something to watch. A really good, interesting point to pay attention to how
I
the
th-
Ravens' sack production and sack total compare with the Seahawks with Mike
yes.
Macdonald. Yeah, so
Yes.
thank you
And
for that. We'll be watching that. Yeah, and
and I
Lee, if
think
you
and I think
no, go
go
ahead.
ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think too, like, and as to relate that to the Falcons game, in a generic, simplistic sense, the more you stop or slow down the run game, the more passing situations you will create. The more, and I guess this is very simplistic, forgive me, the more passing situations you create, the more opportunity you have to create confusion for the quarterback and get to the quarterback. I think if you create an extra 50 to 70 obvious passing downs across the span of the season, you're giving your pass rushers and whoever is getting after the quarterback, you're giving them more opportunity to get sacks from a general standpoint. But the strength of what we had last year, and I have cautioned Seahawks fans on this, and some of them did not like it. You're facing 2 teams, the Rams and the 49ers, who run the ball exceptionally well. And the strength of Mike Macdonald's system, and what I think the strength of the system under Zach Orr is going to be, is if we put you in situations that are known passing downs, 2nd and 8, 3rd and 6, we have such a wide coverage umbrella, so many options. Our players are so well trained that we can give you so many looks that's going to slow down the quarterback's processing and lead to more quarterback pressures and sacks like we want to see. So to see us not slow down the run game against the Falcons, that was concerning because
Yeah,
we would not be creating as many opportunities for known passing downs. If I said that in a way that makes sense.
you did. Thank you. Because one of the things that I have, and several, I call them family members around here, are subscribers, but some of the family members have shared the same concerns in terms of if you had to say what is one weakness on our defense as a whole, what is one? And a lot of people said our run game needs to improve. Our
Mm-hmm.
ability, I'm not run game, but our run, our ability to defend against the run needs
Yep.
to
Yep.
improve. And if that is a weakness for us, we know these teams are out there going to exploit that. If they can see that the Ravens struggle in run defense, that's what they're going to go at. I mean, and so how do we improve on that?
Yeah. I think some of our problems can be handled with non-traditional answers. To be honest with you, occasionally the boundary side run game where I'm watching. I mean, two of the situations in the Falcons game, we're talking about extremely large holes to run through to the boundary out of 11 personnel. And I think people on my channel probably get tired of me mentioning those indicators. 11 personnel run to the boundary. I think it's a well. Look, I think we're going on offensively for the Ravens this year. We're going to be doing that a lot with Derrick Henry. We're going to be running the ball into the boundary and play action to the field. But that's a different animal. I don't think our D tackles handled a lot of things well in the preseason, and I'm not going to name names because one or two of them are were released or cut yesterday. But there were some situations where, from a defensive tackle standpoint, you saw a pretty big drop off from particular guys being on the field that are going to play a lot now, and particular guys on the field who are apparently no longer on the roster. So I don't see any need to denigrate some of those guys, but certainly some of those guys were a problem. And then another, when we put Bo Braid in the game and he played safety to the boundary, those things were not an issue. That dude comes downhill and he's going to make something happen now. And so there is an element to that for me about who is that boundary side safety. I saw a different level of trigger. What I mean by trigger is I'm a safety. I see a read, I go. When Braid was on the field versus other guys who were on the field a little bit more against the Falcons.
Yeah. Okay. I've got some things to keep my eye on. Thank you, Coach. I'm going to be watching for that. But I'm telling you, Bo Braid, that is a very, very amazing player. And I'm so glad he made the 53-man roster.
Oh yeah,
So glad about it. I didn't know if he would. Quite honestly, I didn't know. Just because we had so much depth in the secondary for him to contend. But I'm very pleased that he's on that 53-man roster, and I hope he does get some playing time. Last game preseason against the Packers. Now this one, from a defensive perspective, Coach, what stuck out to you negatively about the Ravens?
it did not look like to me we showed up to that game with a mentality that I think is required to succeed overall
Yeah,
from a defensive standpoint. Now, that's a very global statement. So you're talking about coaches and players, obviously, when you do that. So that's a little bit of an inflammatory judgment as well, because we don't normally see that, in my opinion. I didn't see the same level of block destruction, meaning willingness to get to my gap or come downhill I didn't see the same level of effort. I'll be
yeah,
honest with you.
yeah,
They out executed us, and I felt like I will relate it to Bo Braid somewhat. There was two run concepts that they executed against us early in the game when Bo Braid is not on the field, and then when he was on the field, one of them he had a tackle for loss. Uh, the one what everyone recalls, where he's downhill right now and he tackles the guy in the backfield, and then another one where he cuts from the backside and makes a tackle. There was a clear difference between Bo Braid being on the field, kind of rolled up in the box as that nickel, versus Pepe Williams, who we've since cut and released. So I think I think that's part of the reason is that Bo Braid was willing and able to get to that spot. So maybe he can't translate that against starting level guys, but I didn't think we put our best foot forward defensively in that game. I thought Ojabo had one good pass rush. I remember one that was a loss as well. He also dropped out in coverage once against an empty formation. I thought he looked pretty good,
Yeah,
to be honest with you.
he did.
So he looked a little more smooth out in that space than I would have thought. I thought Wiggins had two really good reps as well. He looks like he's a dedicated left side corner, and it looks like JAD is a dedicated right side corner, which
Yeah,
is what we do in our defense, left and right.
yeah.
Uh,
It just didn't
Go
seem
ahead.
like we played with any sense of urgency.
None,
That's
none.
I mean, and that might not be the proper football terminology to use, but
Nope. I agree.
I just didn't see us playing like, hey, this is the last game of the preseason. I want to put it all out there and leave everything on the field.
Yep.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I agree. I just
Yeah.
did a film study video this morning before the kids and everybody woke up on Tony Jefferson, that used to play for the Ravens and had an amazing game in Week 3 of the Chargers preseason against the Cowboys. And I don't like I told you earlier, I don't get to listen to interviews or really. I certainly don't get to watch ESPN or listen. Occasionally, maybe I'll listen to 105.7 if I'm driving from one client to another. Um, so I don't know this. So this is just perception. Uh, I think it looked like to me, Tony Jefferson showed up that day and was like, this might be the last football game I play.
Mm,
And I don't know that to be sure. I have no
yeah.
knowledge of that. But all I know is he's a 32-year-old safety who showed up and had 14 tackles, two interceptions, a forced fumble,
Ooh,
and played like a maniac.
yeah.
Now, this is maybe an unfair comparison. I because I'm my first part of this statement is possibly not accurate. Maybe Tony Jefferson knew that he was going to make the team and he just showed up to play that way anyway. But I don't think we showed up against the Packers on defense
Yeah.
like we were fighting for a spot. It did not. I didn't see it. It wasn't apparent. I do feel like you can see effort. There's two plays I'm thinking of where I won't say that there was no effort, but just a little less effort, maybe 92% effort instead of 100. And so I think that game was a little surprising for me. Is it worrisome for me? No, because we don't have any evidence and we've never seen Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Marlon Humphrey, any of those guys show up with that mentality ever.
Right.
So, no, it doesn't concern me. Now, we could see it in a regular season, and then that would obviously, have our attention. But that one really stood out. I know a lot of Ravens fans who pretty much stopped watching at halftime, and that's unusual.
Very, very unusual. But I mean, our level of play was also very unusual for a defense. Even when you talk about reserve, second string, third string, even when you talk
Yep.
about depth, we still have a mantra of play like a Raven.
Yep.
We still play defense, hard nosed, tough, physical, sense of urgency, no matter where you fall on the depth chart. That was lacking sorely. I know
Yeah,
there was
and I
not a
thought,
whole lot to take away. There was not a whole lot of positives. But, coach, from the Packers game on defense, if there's a positive that stood out to you, what would it be?
it would be the continued ways that we are deploying Trenton Simpson and the continued ways that the things we are asking him to do. So he is a young player, obviously. Nonetheless, if you look at the course of the three games, the Eagles, Falcons, and Packers, he's been asked to do a wide array of responsibilities, of techniques. He's been good. I think he's been good at most of those. I do think that he's better at being the guy to go attack, go now. When some of the situations where I believe he's being the read man in an RPO, and look, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes all of us we look at a particular play concept and we're like, all right, well, he's the read man. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes we don't know. We don't know the play call. So, there's a couple of times where it looks like to me Trenton Simpson is the read man. He's taken off over here. And so the backside slant is wide open. And I don't know, was it a miscommunication with someone else who was supposed to cover it? I can say that it looks like Trenton Simpson vacated that area, but I don't know because I don't know the defensive call. So for
Right.
me, I'm willing to accept that I can't give a summary judgment. And I think Trenton Simpson played extremely well over the course of the 3 preseason games. Had some tackles for loss against the run. Did a nice job taking on blockers at times. I've seen people. Well, I've muted them on Twitter at this point. Oh, he doesn't take on blockers against the run. He's not physical. I just said I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to. So I think he would be the besides Nate Wiggins. Nate Wiggins getting out there. Bo Braid, obviously, what is there to say? I think he had 9 tackles, 6 or 7 solos.
Yeah.
I saw him in coverage twice, and he looked good. Does Bo Braid meet the standard for what we'll need from a safety? As far as Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson and Kyle Hamilton. I don't know if he's that good in coverage. I don't know that yet, but I'm excited to see him and Kane out there again. Those two guys, and we got a cameo from Nate Wiggins that game too, which I thought he looked really good in the situations that I saw him, particularly in coverage.
Yeah. I'm excited for sure. I have some question marks, but I think every team has question marks going into a regular season because you realize that
Mm-hmm.
your roster is quasi set in stone, but
Yep.
changes can be made at any point, at any time. And for the 53 that we have, and we'll get into that now, but the 53-man roster that the Ravens have created, let's talk about it. Share your thoughts. I'll share mine. We'll talk about surprises, some
Mm-hmm.
players who made the team or who didn't. So let's get into it. All right, coach. So we're going to start here with the 53-man roster that was just announced. A few guys made the reserve list. No surprise there for me. But let's move into the offense. Any surprises to you? Anything that just stood out to you for our quarterbacks and our running backs?
I mean, no. We all wish that we had look in a different multiverse or a different timeline, and Keaton Mitchell is healthy here with Derrick Henry and Justice Hill. We are absolutely loaded at running back in that timeline. Unfortunately, Keaton Mitchell suffered a horrific injury last year, but that backfield of those 3 guys would be an extreme blessing compared to so many teams across the NFL, and even compared to our team the last 3 years, where we, unfortunately, we're dealing with injuries to J.K. and Gus at various times. So I feel blessed for what we have. Unfortunately, Keaton Mitchell won't be healthy. I wonder if he'll even be back this year at all. I hope they don't try to rush the young man along and allow him time to be completely healthy. Rasheen Ali's a talented dude, don't get me wrong, but I think that there's a significant drop off once we get past Justice Hill, keeping him there. I certainly would like I am very respectful and aware of what Josh Johnson does and the things he's really good at. I think I have some knowledge of what he's really good at, and I appreciate his role. Nonetheless, I think he would be better suited as a third quarterback for us. And I don't I wouldn't say that disrespectfully. I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean, I would say that to him that at this point in time, I think that's the best role for you on a Super Bowl caliber roster. But it doesn't appear as if there are many other options out there for a backup quarterback that would be more experienced. And I really like Josh Johnson. I think he plays great in the preseason, and I'm thankful that we have him around. I think the quarterback room for me is one that since we're forced to keep 3 quarterbacks at some point, not right now, but we're forced to, that would be where I would like to see an upgrade. If Tyler Huntley was cut yesterday, then I would be extremely happy to have him back. But I understand, other people have different opinions. I'd like to see a little more depth there.
Uh, Certainly. I'll start with mine. So I took issue with the quarterback room. Obviously, I am over the moon thrilled to have Lamar Jackson QB1. I did not think that Josh Johnson should have been QB2. I'm sorry. You look at how he played game one, and then you look at how he played game two. I know that a player is not going to be 100%, 100% of the time. No one is, no matter what your job, responsibilities are. But
Right.
for someone to be his age, for someone to be in the league as long as he has been in the league, when I saw him game one against the Eagles, I was incredibly disturbed. I just didn't like hardly anything positive that I could think of about Josh Johnson. He came back game two and did much better, significantly better. I think he went 11 for 11, if I'm not mistaken. But,
Yeah, I think so.
and my biggest gripe here at quarterback, why did we not keep Emory Jones? Devin Leary, in my book, was a waste of a draft pick. I did not like what I saw from Devin Leary.
Yeah, I'm not too happy with our draft. The further along we get, the less pleased I am with some of our picks starting at 93. I've been quite loud about that. I've been less pleased with our draft the further along we go, compared to previous drafts that I have some knowledge of.
Yeah. So I would have preferred this to be Lamar number one. Emory Jones, I understand he's, went undrafted rookie, but put Emory Jones in there. If you want to keep Josh at number two, that's fine, but put Emory Jones. I was hoping that Snoop would come back to us, and I know that's selfish. It is very selfish, but I said what I said. I wish he would have come back to us. I wish we would have never let him go, honestly.
He has a
That's
great
kind of where I stand.
story. He has a great story. He's an undrafted free agent out of Utah. Played
Yeah.
extremely well, at Utah. I don't think I'm going back a long time in memory, but I don't think he had a ton of offers even out of high school.
Mm,
Goes to Utah, succeeds. I think he had two really great seasons there, and then we pick him up as a UDFA guy. I credit the Ravens for. It seems to me that we constantly are giving guys opportunity. Tyler Hunt. Well, Emory Jones that you referenced, he's a UDFA guy. So many of those guys are given opportunity and take advantage of it. Bo Braid is another one. Um,
yes.
I wish, the whole thing with the three quarterbacks thing it's very weird to me now. We didn't have to keep two quarterbacks right now, but we will have to do so for the regular season. I feel like it's a limiting factor, and I'll just say it. The NFL, PA, and the owners, I feel like are fighting against reality, which is we need to be probably looking at, I'd say 56 to 57 is probably the right number for a 17 game season.
Mm,
This,
yeah.
a 53-man roster for yesterday and today makes sense. Why? Well, we're not playing any games. The reality of 17 game season in 18 weeks, I think, necessitates a larger roster. How or if they actually ever do that, it'll probably be like most things the NFL does. It'll be too late. So, but I mean, in terms of Josh Johnson, like, yeah, he didn't play well or didn't have a great completion percentage in week one. I was surprised. I thought there was an incomplete pass in there in the second week, but then I looked at the stats and I was like, oh, he's 11 for 11. Like I said earlier, I would, just like the last 2 years, I feel like he would be better fit for, that emergency quarterback thing that they've opened up or made available. But yeah, I do understand the NFL's PA's perspective is
Yeah.
they don't want those guys. They want them to accrue time towards the pension and stuff like that, which
Yeah.
is another issue.
Rasheen Ali, I did not. I did not like what I saw from what I saw in the games in the preseason from him. I didn't like what I saw. I just didn't. Um, I'm so upset, so unfortunate about Owen Wright, because I would have
He looks
taken Owen
great.
Wright.
Yeah,
I would have taken Owen Wright over Rasheen Ali, and I know Rasheen Ali is one of our draft picks. I get it. I understand, but
yeah,
I would have put Owen
no,
Wright in there before I would have put Rasheen Ali. But because of
absolutely.
injury, Rasheen is there. Wide receivers, tight ends, do you have any concerns, any surprises on guys that made wide receiver or tight end?
I didn't think Hardy, showed anything in the preseason. Now maybe the Ravens coaching staff didn't need him to. Apparently, they didn't need him to show anything. Apparently, he didn't need to prove anything to them. For us, for Ravens fans, for me, I
Yeah.
I would have wanted to see a little more. Now, having said that, I did really like the film I saw from previous seasons, particularly 2022 and 2023. I did, but when I did my roster projection, I did not have him. I did not. So um, I understand that they have six receivers here. I don't think that Deontay Hardy is going to play a lot of receiver, number one, and I'm not sure Devontae Walker right now is ready to, from a health standpoint. Or I don't know this, but even if he is completely healthy, I don't think he's a better receiver to be on the field right now than Kirkwood or Wade. I think both of those guys look like better receivers on the field right now. Now, in 2 years from now, 3 years from now, what I don't know, that's in the future. But for right
Yeah.
now, I wouldn't have cut Devontae Walker, no way. But I don't know that I would have retained Hardy, me personally. Everything else, there's really not much we can do about it other than get Mark Andrews healthy. Obviously, I feel like by keeping Hardy, we're hopefully we bring back Wade on the practice squad
Yes.
and Kirkwood and on the practice squad. That would provide some depth, but we're not as deep at receiver in my opinion, with Hardy there and a apparently injured Walker as well. I don't know if they're going to put him if they're going to do something with him as far as IR, what his status is. I know he's been dealing with a rib injury for a while, which is obviously a very limiting factor.
Certainly. My issue with wide receiver is number one, we should have gotten a number one proven veteran wide receiver a long time ago for Lamar Jackson, but we didn't. So now we're in the pickle that we're in here, and we look at this wide receiver core, and it looks, I'm going to be honest, to me, it looks underwhelming. It really does. I understand you not wanting to cut Devontae Walker. You have to figure out what you're going to do with him. But at the end of the day, the goal of the NFL is to put the player on the field who has the best, who's putting you in the best position to succeed. And if you can answer the question, game one is Devontae Walker putting us in the best position to succeed. If your answer is yes, then you keep him. If your answer is no, then you figure out who is. To me, it Dayton Wade.
Yeah, hopefully he's able to stick around. But I had him on mine. I think when I did my roster projection video, I guess Sunday night. It feels like 3 weeks ago at this point, and I was and I think I had Hardy and Wade, and then I switched them because I said in my video, I said this is not what I would do, but I think this is what the Ravens are going to do.
Mm,
They signed Hardy intentionally and brought him in, and I like the film, and hopefully that's what we see in terms of a returner. But I feel like some of these guys, I guess Wade would qualify. If they can help you in the return game and play receiver, then you're kind of getting a 2-for-1 from a roster standpoint. And
yeah,
he didn't do anything for us in the preseason. Look, to relate it to your point, Yolanda, I didn't want us to take uh, I didn't want us to take a defensive player at 93. I was so excited when we got to pick 93 and Javon Baker was still on the board. I was like, can we please take Javon Baker? Because
yeah,
I feel like you're getting maybe not first round talent, but you're getting to me what's debatably a second round talent at pick 93 at wide receiver. And I feel like we would be in a far better place from a talent standpoint, short term and long term. Well, maybe more so long term, if we had drafted a Javon Baker and another receiver, in round four. I, was so disappointed by that pick, and I hope to be proven wrong. I hope Adisa
yeah.
Isaac, I hope he becomes a Hall of Fame player, and it becomes my biggest swing and a miss. That would be fantastic. But we're not there right now at receiver because I don't think our depth looks like what I thought it would look like. You know, Kirkwood and Wade being around the practice squad would be great, particularly if we do suffer an injury. There, at least
Yeah.
it would give us serviceable guys. I liked Wade a lot.
I do too, and I just hope that he clears waivers. I don't know
Yeah.
that he will, but you know, he because what he put out on tape was really impressive for a
Yep.
rookie, really promising in terms of if other teams are looking to deepen their roster. their wide receiver room, they might take a really close look at Wade.
Yeah.
And
I
how
do
does that
wonder.
bode for us?
No, I agree, and I do wonder. What could we get out of Tylan Wallace this year? Could he? Let's just say that Nelson Aguilar, for whatever reason, is injured for a period of time. Could Tylan Wallace step in and give us the same level of production, 30 to 40 catches, that supplementary role, okay, 3 or 4 touchdowns? Could he give us that? He certainly looks like he could.
I think he
He looks
can.
like he has the potential to. If Rashad Bateman goes down, could could Tylan Wallace step in and play the X receiver and give us that same level of potential against starting corners? I don't, it doesn't look like necessarily he could to me. So I think we're a man down there, and so I'm interested to see what the Ravens do, if anything, uh, right now in
Yeah.
terms of bringing players in and up to the trade deadline.
My perspective, coach, is we're a man and a half down. And the half is because I don't know what Rashad Bateman is going to do this year.
Right.
For me, I look at evidence. I don't want to hear, well, he was great in college, or, I expect him to be wonderful. I expect him to have a monster season. I will give credit where credit is due. Rashad Bateman can get open. Excellent route runner. All of the things.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
you have to be able to have a connection with your quarterback. And if you don't have that, everything else is a mishit. So I can't confirm at this moment whether there will be a connection between Rashad Bateman and Lamar Jackson. And for that reason, in my book, we are a man and a half down, because the half goes to Rashad Bateman. That's
Yeah.
kind of what
Hopefully he stays healthy and gives us. The one thing I said about last year with him and OBJ was, from a front office standpoint, I understand why you did that, because you're giving yourself overlap at one position. In the case of OBJ returning from injury, in the case of Rashad Bateman, has suffered injuries throughout his career, short career at that point. So I guess the thinking could be, well, if Rashad Bateman gets injured, then OBJ plays more. If OBJ gets injured, then Rashad Bateman plays more. Okay, fine. I think what it also did was suppressed both of their stats from the standpoint of them splitting time. I forget who the reporter is. Jonas
Schaefer,
Sheffer. I think I always mispronounce his name, so forgive me for
Schaefer.
that. Yeah, I think he did something where he showed the amount of snaps they played independent of one another, and then the amount of snaps that they played on the field at the same time. And I think they were only on the field at the same time, if I remember right, 228 snaps. So you're talking about a large number of snaps where one of them was on the sideline. And so what we need to see, even though Bateman played all year last year, so that's good, right? I think what we need to see is, can you do that while you're playing 45 to 50 snaps a game instead of whatever the numbers were? And I don't pretend to remember exactly what the numbers were. So you're
Yeah,
not wrong there in having concern about him, being reliably there. And hopefully he's taken it, on his own shoulders to get as healthy and strong as possible for this long season, because it is 17 games is an incredibly long season, if you ask me.
very, very long season. Yeah. And that's not to mention the postseason, which I fully anticipate us to be in and be victorious.
Absolutely.
I don't have any issues with tight ends. No surprise. In my prediction, I thought the Ravens were taking all three of these in terms of tight ends. This is where it
Yeah.
gets interesting, Coach, and I really want to hear from you. Offensive line. What are your thoughts about those who made the 53-man roster?
Yeah. When I sat and did my roster configuration, I think it was Sunday night, or I think I worked on it Sunday night and then didn't finish it until Monday. So sorry for thinking out loud. But I looked at it and I thought, we look thin here. This looks more thin to me. I would like to be stronger here. Now, I understand what some people would say is, like, you can't have every position be a position of strength. Well, I think that's the level of expectation we should have. I think that's the standard that we should have. We should expect to have the best possible roster at each position. You're professionals, and that's what you get paid to do every day from a front office standpoint. So I don't really give any quarter or give any what's the word, forgiveness, 10% forgiveness level, because it's such a competitive environment and so many other teams are looking to acquire these players. I think we're a little thin at offensive line right now when you're talking about Tyler Linderbaum not there. Now, he practiced, I think, the last 2 days,
He did.
and I think had a red jersey on, no contact
No
or something.
contact. Yeah.
So it's both a positive and a negative to have a guy like Patrick McCarry. I am glad that we have had him the last 3 years. I am, because when we've had injuries, he stepped in and he's done admirable at times. And in some cases, he's done better than I expected. Nonetheless, there does come a point in time for me where I would like to see us say, hey, Patrick, you're going to be our right guard, or you're going to be our left guard. And we're going to utilize you and not hold you in reserve for if someone gets hurt. It sounds to me like they're going to rotate him and Rosengarten. That's what it sounds like. Um, I'm not a huge. I recognize the usefulness of that, even, and it's reluctant for me to say that. I have to recognize it, but I'm not a huge fan of it. Um, I wish that we would pick one guy over the other and get the strongest five guys out there possible. Who knows? I would love to be proven wrong here, Yolanda. I'm not a huge advocate right now for Falele being our starting right guard. I'm not, but I hope to be proven wrong. I do.
Coach, I take issue with a couple of players that are named on the starting offensive line. For the reasons that you just mentioned about Daniel Falele, I don't think he's ready to start day one. We take on Chris Jones. That is laughable.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to be crass. I promise I'm not trying to be smart alecky. This is a problem. What is the solution to the problem that we face in 1 week and 1 day from now?
yeah, they're going to look at that as a matchup that when you're a coach, you look, okay, are we going to win this matchup? Is this going to be a draw, 50-50, particular matchups across the board? The Chiefs, are going to look at that matchup and say, that's one we think will win. And so in pass rush situations, oftentimes what you'll do as a D-line coach or defensive coordinator is, let's say your right defensive end. In an obvious pass rush situation, you may say, okay, we're going to kick him inside and get him to go against their left guard because that's a matchup we think we're going to win 100% of the time. And so, to your point, when you see matchups like that as a Ravens fan and you can identify that, certainly professional coaches are going to see that as well and look to exploit that as best they can. And the paradoxical thing about Falele, based on what I have seen and what other people have talked about, who I trust with offensive line evaluation, is that he's been far better in pass pro than he has against, while run blocking, which you would kind of presume it would be the opposite.
Yeah.
So we we may be, when you look at the way some of Ben Cleveland is another one that when he has played, he's been a better pass blocking offensive lineman than run blocking offensive line. We may be a pass pro blocking offensive line, which would be the craziest thing in 2024 versus what we were when Greg Roman was here, up to through 2022. So it's the most unusual thing, and we could all be wrong in that. Maybe Falele comes out there and plays lights out, but it's kind of hard to see that right now.
Again, Coach, I, um, as I told you before, and most people know I'm an attorney, so I look at evidence. And so when I hear statements like that, hey, he might come out and be lights out game one. I just want to say, well, point me to the evidence that showed you or convinced you or swayed you to come to that conclusion, because maybe I missed it, but I haven't seen any evidence, whether it's been through the off season, whether it was through games 1, 2, and 3 of the preseason. I just haven't seen it. It wasn't even that I saw like, okay, well, there are glimpses of what I think could possibly be. I just haven't seen it consistently. And that's something that does concern me.
I think it was someone in my YouTube comment section, and I wish at this point I remembered who made it. It was a very astute and intelligent point. And to our frustration level about the offensive line, first of all, Ravens fans, we're justified in doing so. We just spent a ton of money on a quarterback that we want to be upright, and so we would like to build a wall around him. Have the Ravens done that? No, I don't think we have. Now a further frustration, or what might exacerbate that, is it appears to us that there has not been a competition. Now we don't
Yeah.
maybe that's making a judgment that's too soon. I don't know what you call that in a legal standpoint. Feel free to let me know. But it appears as if when we watch the preseason games, Falele got the overwhelming majority of the snaps at right guard throughout the entire first half or most of the game, and Voorhees got the overwhelming majority of the snaps at left guard throughout the entirety of the first half or the whole game. And we did not see this outright competition. Now, another reason why I think this is such a great point by whoever made that comment is, and we just talked about it a couple of moments ago, last year, the Ravens rotated right tackle sometimes, or we rotated left. When Ronnie Stanley came back in week 5 of 2022, we rotated him with Macari at times. I don't know if you remember that game, but I think it was a third possession. The announcers were like, and Ronnie Stanley's not on the field. And I think there was a moment where everybody was like, oh my gosh, really? Well, the Ravens were rotating tackles.
Yeah.
So by the fact that we've done that as a staff before already, and we're saying we might do that at right tackle this year anyway, to not see any obvious evidence of competition at left guard or right guard, I think further frustrates everyone.
Yeah.
And so that comment really was eye opening for me. That it's not just the Ravens aren't, well, I guess NFL teams are apparently going to be a public traded entity at some point. It sounds like, but it's not a publicly traded corporation, I guess, yet. And so we don't have any say in it. Nonetheless, we do have a lot vested in the outcomes. And for fans to not see obvious evidence in preseason games of competition, and for media, apparently, it sounds like, to be prohibited from commenting on offensive line competitions in
Right.
training camp, those two things, I think, when they happen at the same time, that I think that should cause consternation or concern, minimal concern.
Certainly.
So that, I don't think that any of us are wrong in having those concerns. It's been so unusual to see an offensive line be better at pass pro than we are at run blocking, and along with the fact that we signed Derrick
Derrick
Henry,
Henry.
Lamar is Lamar just without Derrick Henry, Lamar makes your running game. I don't know, Yolanda. Let me say Lamar makes your running game 30% better.
Hmm.
May I almost want to say 40, but that might be too. Just Lamar, just Lamar.
Yes.
The athletic quarterback dimension. People often, I think, understand it in terms of we drop back to pass. There's no one open. He scrambles for 15 yards. That's a backbreaker. Yes, it
Yes.
is. But in the run game, it is almost even more annoying and awful to deal with. So
Yeah.
Lamar raises the level of the run game, just him by himself. Derrick Henry further does that. I don't know if it's 30%, but we have to have a minimum level of execution and physicality as an offensive line for those guys to, you know, to be successful. So
Yes.
it does feel tenuous as it stands right now. One
Sure.
week from now, right? We'll all be
Yeah.
sitting there waiting for the TV to come on
Ooh.
and watch them.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm just going to say this. This is a question that I don't have an answer to. But why is Salah on the roster? I move on. I don't understand. But I'm going to move on because I know we have to get through the rest of the members of the 53.
Yeah, most
Defense.
of my answers probably take too long. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no, no. We're fine. You are fine, coach. I'm having a blast. And if you are enjoying this content, please make sure you hit the like button. And if you're new, welcome. Make sure you subscribe, join the family, go over to All 22 Films and subscribe to him as well because he is giving you all of the defense football knowledge that you can't get anywhere else. So, with that, defensive lineman, coach, any concerns or anyone that stood out to you as a question, why did we go this direction on
I
D-line?
feel like I feel like we're ridiculously blessed here. This is, um, but and again, I don't want to go back in time, but to spin this to the offensive line, there's only two defensive tackles needed in a lot of the time you spend on the field as a defense, because you're going against 11 personnel, so you're not going to have three defensive tackles on the field. You're going to have two, and two defensive ends or outside linebackers and two inside linebackers, what I commonly refer to as a 4-2. So to see five quality guys here, and in fact, there'll be times where Owe or Van Noy or Tavius Robinson kicks down inside on pass downs. It becomes a little tough to handle, from a depth standpoint, to look at the offensive line where there's five guys on the field at a time. This is a simple perspective, or elementary observation. We would like to see 10 deep, and that's a high standard. I know people are going to say, well, you can't get that in the NFL. Well, it is your job to create a roster that, in my opinion, is as deep as possible, and we've done that at defensive line, interior, and outside linebacker. Have we done that as well with the offensive line right now on all, as we record this late August? I can't say we have.
No, no. Yeah, I'm comfortable with the D line, the interior D line. I want to see Broderick Washington take a step in the right direction, one more
Yeah.
step further than where he was last year. That run defense, when we talked about earlier, I think that is a sore spot. So I'm looking for our interior D linemen to be able to defend against the run a little bit better than they did last year, starting with Justin
Yeah.
Madubuike, all of them. And, Michael Pierce, we need to see it. So I didn't
Yeah.
have any issue here. I didn't have any problem with those who made the interior D line. Same thing with the outside linebackers. The only one Adisa Isaac, were you surprised that he made the roster?
I think it's going to force me to professionally grow here when I evaluate Adisa Isaac, because first of all, he sounds like a fantastic young dude.
Yeah,
Everything that I've read about him. Nonetheless, my initial evaluation was I never wanted us to draft him in the first place. So, and again, he's the player that I hope proves me wrong and has a Hall of Fame career and 100 sacks, and people get to clip quote stuff to me about how stupid I was. I hope that's what happens. Um, you know, but I don't. I think he's the sixth guy in what look, you have five listed there. I think he's the sixth guy because I think Malik Harrison plays in front of him too.
yes.
So for me, I think there's some real positional overlap there that was not needed for 2024. I didn't mean to be overly negative about a particular player, especially a young dude like him who apparently is a great student too. So I feel kind of bad about saying those things, but nonetheless, this is a professional football team that I'm trying to evaluate from a professional standpoint. I think you got to squeeze every drop out of it. And for me, based on what you and I have talked about in the last 5 minutes, uh, we're lacking some O-line depth. We have, I think, almost too much depth at outside linebacker. It seems quite obvious to me that O-line could have been another pick in the third or fourth round with how much depth was out there. But look, he's a good player. He's a good
Yeah,
player. He's got great closing speed, a great body. I think right now he's the sixth guy out of the outside linebacker group, with Malik Harrison being a guy who's going to play that
yeah,
hybrid inside linebacker, outside linebacker position to the boundary.
right. Yeah. Um, yeah, I agree with you. I don't know about Adisa Isaac, but we shall see. Well, he made the 53 for a reason. Let's see what the reason is.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I don't have any concerns here on inside linebacker either. I thought Chris Board was going to make the roster. I know some people are like, why did he make it? I figured he was going to be, and Malik Harrison too. I felt that both of them would make the roster. So
Yeah, good players. A little bit athletically limited at times at that
yeah,
level compared to me and all the people that I know. An amazing athlete, once in a generation. But Chris Board's a tough, smart dude, and he's played a lot of good football, also,
yeah,
particularly on special teams as well. And so if unfortunately Chris Board or Malik Harrison was to go down, Josh Ross is a pretty good football player too. He's limited, and those guys all would be playing next to Roquan Smith if they had to find themselves on the field in our
right,
in our base defense.
yeah, yep. Okay, the last members of the 53 are the cornerbacks, safeties, and special teams. We'll start with special teams because that's kind of, I think that was obvious. Justin Tucker, Jordan Stout, and Nick Moore. I don't think anybody thought anything different. But coach, cornerbacks, any surprise to you on the cornerbacks who made the 53?
Not any surprise. I mean, I was pleasantly pleasant. I was happy to see JAD play so much in the preseason. Happy to see him get so many reps and so many opportunities to be put in different coverage situations. And so him and the coaches can go back and evaluate it, based on whatever the call was. Again, reflecting back on something I said about 20 minutes ago, is we don't know the call so often. And so we don't know exactly what the read was at different times.
Yeah. Yeah. I,
Excuse me. Sorry.
oh no, you're fine.
Sorry. I had to cough. Unmuted.
Oh, sure.
I like JAD. I feel like TJ Tampa has the same type of ability based on what I saw in college, but I haven't seen him. I haven't seen him at all. And so, do I feel like we're deep enough at corner? Well, yes, because we've got our Darius Washington who can play nickel. We've got Braid, excuse me, who can play nickel. And then I said this in our Discord the other day. We have the Hulk. If we want to put Kyle Hamilton at nickel, he's the Hulk.
Yes. Yeah.
He's physically going to dominate whatever matchup he gets down there. And I've been watching a lot of film from last year about, I forget who it was, put out a thing on how often Kyle Hamilton was targeted. It wasn't much. Even when he was beat, generally it was a pick or a rub, meaning they're running a defender at his outside shoulder to prevent him from expanding with the route. Basically, it's like a pick and roll in the
Yeah.
in the NBA.
NBA.
Yeah, they're trying to create leverage for the receiver just based on sacrificing another receiver in the route combination. So like when I call him the Hulk, that's what I mean is you have to go 2-for-1 generally to get someone open against him because of his length, his intelligence, and his speed. So in terms of corner, if we omit TJ Tampa from there, let's just say mentally we omit him from there, we only have 4. I still feel like we're fine there because our nickel situation, our slot corner situation is so deep. And your list there doesn't even include obviously Arthur Millette.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Arthur Millette's on the list as a, IR, designated to return, but we just,
Right.
we don't know when. So we'll see.
It's a good group. It's a good mix too of veterans and young guys. I mean, you look at, Nate Wiggins,
Yeah.
TJ Tampa, rookies, Sanusi Kane, Bo Braid, rookies, Kyle Hamilton, third year. It's an increasingly young league. The owners want it to be that way so they can pay these guys the lowest amount possible, obviously. So it's an increasingly young league, and nonetheless, we do have 3 elder statesmen here, I guess: Marlon Humphrey,
Yeah.
Marcus Williams, and Eddie Jackson. And I just think the world of Marcus Williams. I'm not talking about his salary commitment.
Yeah.
To see what he did last year
With a
and play
torn
with
pec.
basically one arm, that appeals to me from a deep rooted standpoint in terms of a person saying, I know I'm not putting my best foot forward here, but I'm going to show up and do this every day anyway. And so I can't wait to see the healthy version of Marcus Williams next to the healthy version of Kyle Hamilton at safety.
Certainly. Absolutely agree with you about Marcus Williams. His grit and determination are to be admired. I will say, you made a point, and I just have to underscore it. Truer words have never been spoken, Coach. You said a moment ago that looking at our secondary, there is a good, healthy mix of veterans and rookies. That is what bothers me about the O-line. We did not do that. We did not take that same
Right.
philosophy and apply it over to the O-line,
Yep.
where during the preseason, and as we're expecting them to be starters, 3 of them are essentially rookies because they've either never played that position or they've never played an NFL snap due to injury. So when you look at Voorhees, you look at Rosengarten, and you look at Falele. He's never been a starter at right guard.
Yep.
We did not apply that same logic here in terms of making sure that the same way that we ensured our secondary was balanced in terms of young and seasoned. That does bother me quite a bit about how we viewed our offensive line, that wall that's supposed to be around and protecting our franchise quarterback. Well,
Yeah, you can never have enough good corners and you can never have enough good offensive linemen. It doesn't matter whether it's high school, college, the NFL, or a video game. You can never have enough of those two. And so it's your professional responsibility to create. I mean, this is a probably very short-sighted way to say this. I think it's your professional responsibility to create a situation where you can't fail. That's your job. And
yeah,
we all know you're going to fail. Even last year they went 13-4. They still lost 4 games in a season where I think it was, borderline historic what they did, particularly on
yeah,
defense. So from an offensive line standpoint, that should be the standard. I would love, 1 month from now or 2 months from now or 3 months from now for us to be like, wow, we were wrong about the offensive line.
I
That would
love
be
that.
great.
Yeah,
I would love that. And for the Ravens front office and their coaches to be, proven true that it's even more of an uphill battle now, probably without, Joe D, who passed away. Unfortunately, that's,
yeah,
awful to be able, as players and then a family too, to, go through that situation. So
sure.
hopefully the offensive line can pick up the slack and outgain all of our expectations, because we're not wrong right now. I think to say that's the weakness, the relative weakness. I always like to say, relative strength and relative weakness. That's the relative weakness of the team as it stands right now.
Sure. Certainly. Well, Coach, thank you so much for spending some time with me and sharing your knowledge, your insight, your wisdom, especially from a defensive perspective on the current state of our Baltimore Ravens, our team. So, with that, I will just ask if you would let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. First of all, second of all, I'm sorry that it took a little while to get coordinated. My schedule is, especially once the school year begins in football, at the same time, my schedule is very dynamic. Let's put it that way. So I do operate a YouTube channel, all 22 films, and it's Ravens based. I also cover the Lions as well, because I think I have adult onset of ADHD. I can't not make videos. If I'm sitting there and I just made a Ravens video or I just made a Lions video, I'm like, all right, well, I want to do something else. I don't know what that's called. Maybe hunger. But I operate a YouTube channel that is a large scale endeavor intentionally to try to challenge myself and see where it's able to go. And I have a lot of trust and faith in God that if He's given me that motivation, that there must be a reason for it. So, and I love doing it, Yolanda. I can tell you
Yeah.
love doing what you're doing too. So, and I did branch out in the last year or year and a half and try to operate a Twitter X, I guess,
Yeah.
um, social media as well, and try to share one or two play breakdowns. So that's what I love to do when I have time, when my wife and children are asleep or otherwise occupied. And that's
Yes.
pretty much what I do. I do have a Discord for Ravens fans as well. That's kind of a insulated or protected community for us to discuss the Ravens in an environment that's not going to be invaded by people who are bad faith actors. Let's put it that way.
Yes. Thank you, Coach, for being here. Thank you again. Before we go for this upcoming season, what is your prediction, win, loss for the Ravens?
I usually do a range. Is that going to be
Okay.
okay with you if I do a
Yeah,
range, or are you
that's
trying
perfectly
to?
fine. Nope. A range is good.
Yeah, so we have to start with the preposition that Lamar Jackson plays 15, 16, or 17 games.
Yes.
I think we have enough evidence at this point in 2024 that if Lamar Jackson plays football for the Ravens for 16 or 17 games, or if he plays 10 games, whatever number he plays, we're going to win 70 to 80%, 65, 70, 75% of those games. I think we have enough evidence to show that. Even in 2021, which was a roster and a team that was undercut by injuries and a significantly weakened offensive line, we were still at one point, I think, 9-2 or 9-3. So I think this year there shouldn't be any reason why, even with a difficult schedule, if we have a healthy Lamar Jackson, that we can't win 12, 11, 12, 13 football games once again. And I understand people will say, we just lost Mike Macdonald. We lost a ton of defensive coaching talent. Um, and and we don't have the most overwhelming looking receiving core or offensive line in football. Well, other teams have problems too. So I think I have to guard my pessimism about some of that. I think there's no reason why we can't be 12-5 at the end of the regular season. And maybe, and I always like to preface if it's 12-5, Is it 12-4 and we sit people in the last week? Or is it 11-5 and we have to win the last week in order to get a home game? Because there's a difference there in where you're positioned leading into that last week. And what's so when I say 12-5, I mean 12-4 and sitting Lamar Jackson the last week. I really don't see why that can't happen again with the amount of talent that we have on offense and defense.
All right, you heard it here first. I think we're going to have a really fantastic season, have a few issues on our team, but certainly all the other teams have issues of their own. So our issues are not insurmountable. We just got to be smart and figure out a way to overcome them. Again, thank you, Coach, for being here. Ladies, gentlemen, that's all I have for you all today. Make sure you go over, subscribe, follow all 22 films. You can come back and thank me later. Until next time, you take care, stay safe, and always remember, go Ravens. God bless.